My name is Corinne Maddox. I'm 36 years old. I live in Utah, and I'm the mother of a bright, funny 6-year-old girl named Maisie. I thought I had a stable life. I thought I had a marriage built on trust, on partnership. But I was wrong. One Sunday afternoon, everything changed. Laurel, my sister-in-law, burst through my back door, dragging her son, Noah, behind her. She pointed a trembling finger at me and screamed, "You hit my son!" I blinked. What? I'd been in the kitchen the entire time, prepping snacks for Maisie. Laurel shoved Noah forward like a shield. "Tell her," she hissed. Noah looked at the floor and mumbled, "She slapped me." My heart stopped. I hadn't even spoken to the boy that day. Then my husband, Jared, appeared in the doorway. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "You've always had a temper," he said. Just like that, I was condemned. No evidence, no questions, no hesitation. The man I'd shared my life with believed his sister's lie without blinking. And worse, he acted like it made sense. That's when I realized, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was an attack. And I had no idea how deep the betrayal really went. But I was about to find out. Before all of this, people used to say we had a solid little life. Jared and I had been married for almost 10 years. We weren't flashy, but we were steady. We lived in a modest home outside Salt Lake City. Brick exterior, white shutters, a creaky old swing Jared never got around to fixing. Our daughter, Maisie, made it feel alive. She loved to paint sidewalk chalk galaxies on our driveway and pretend she was the mayor of her own tiny world. I cooked. Jared mowed the lawn. We weren't perfect, but we had our rhythm. And then Laurel moved back into the picture. She'd recently divorced her second husband. No one was surprised, and temporarily moved in with Jared's mother, Gail, who lived just 3 streets over. "It's just until she gets back on her feet," Jared said. Laurel didn't knock when she came over. She'd just swing open the back door like it was hers and step in with Noah in tow. Noah was 7, loud, impulsive, and borderline feral. He once smeared peanut butter into our ceiling fan to see what would happen. I tried to be patient. I really did. I knew Laurel was struggling, and Noah was just a kid. But Laurel, she thrived on chaos. She floated from crisis to crisis, always painting herself as the victim. Jared and his mom bought into it every time. They'd talk about her like she was some fragile bird who'd been battered by life, not someone who left wreckage behind her everywhere she went. Still, I played nice. I smiled through her unannounced visits, wiped juice off my floors, and picked up after Noah when he tore through the living room like a whirlwind. I told myself it was temporary. I had no idea she was laying a trap. It was a Sunday afternoon like any other. Maisie was in her room working on a drawing of a dragon with rainbow wings. I was in the kitchen slicing apples and cantaloupe for her snack, humming to myself. The back door slammed open. Laurel stood there, breathing hard, clutching Noah's wrist like she'd just dragged him through a battlefield. His cheeks were red, but not swollen. Just the kind of red you get when you've been crying on command. "You hit my son!" she shrieked. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she snapped. She shoved Noah toward me. "Tell her!" Noah looked down at his sneakers and sniffled. She slapped me." I stared at him, stunned. "I didn't even see you today, Noah." "You yelled at me because I spilled juice," he whispered. "Then you hit me." I hadn't even been near him. I'd asked him earlier not to jump on the couch, and that was it. Jared came rushing in from the hallway, his face tight with confusion. "What's going on?" Laurel whipped around. "Ask your wife why your nephew's crying." Jared looked at me. I waited for him to say something, anything to defend me, but he didn't. Instead, he crossed his arms and said, "You've always had a temper. Did you lose it this time?" I blinked. "Jared, are you serious right now?" "I'm just asking." My heart dropped, not because Laurel was accusing me, but because Jared didn't hesitate. He didn't pull me aside or even ask what happened. He just believed her. I swore on Maisie's life that I hadn't touched Noah. Laurel called me a liar to my face. Jared said nothing. An hour later, Gail showed up. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it. Didn't even glance at me before saying, For the sake of the children, I think you should leave for a few days. No, I said flatly. This is my home. You're upsetting the family, she said in that cold, matriarchal tone she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable but be cruel. Distressing the children. You weren't here, I said. You don't know what happened. I know, Laurel, she said simply. That told me everything. They'd already made up their minds. Truth didn't matter. I was guilty because I didn't coddle them, because I wasn't one of them. I thought that would be the worst of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, Child Protective Services showed up at my door. When I opened the door and saw the woman in a charcoal gray blazer holding a leather binder, my stomach dropped. Mrs. Maddox? She asked in a tone that was professional, but not unkind. Yes, I managed to say, though my voice felt like it had to claw its way out of my throat. My name is Detective Liza Haynes. I'm with Child Protective Services. We received a report alleging that you may have physically harmed your nephew. I need to ask you a few questions and also check in on your daughter, if she's home. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. I didn't do anything, I said quickly, maybe too quickly. I swear, I never laid a hand on him. She nodded, calm and non-confrontational. That's what we're here to determine. If that's the case, I just need to gather information and get a complete picture. I stepped aside, letting her in. Maisie was in her room, humming softly as she lined up her colored markers in perfect rainbow order. Liza peeked in and greeted her with a warm smile. Hi there, sweetie. Just wanted to say hello. Maisie beamed. I'm drawing a seahorse dragon. Liza smiled back. That sounds magical. She turned to me. She looks happy and healthy. That's a good sign. But her words didn't soothe the storm in my chest. I poured her a glass of water, but my hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped the pitcher. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and opened her binder. Tell me what happened that day, she said. I tried to explain, but my words stumbled. I was still in disbelief myself. How do you convince someone of a truth so obvious it shouldn't need explaining? Then it hit me. The camera. 2 years ago, Jared installed a motion-activated camera facing our backyard and the sliding door. It was mostly for watching Maisie when she played outside, never meant for security. But that might have been its purpose all along. I might have something, I said, bolting upright and rushing to grab my laptop. Liza leaned in as I pulled up the video feed from that afternoon. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to show what mattered. There was Noah, alone in the living room. He spilled something, red juice, all over the floor. He glanced toward the hallway like he was waiting for someone. Then Laurel appeared. She knelt beside him, whispered something I couldn't make out. Noah nodded, and then, plain as day, she slapped him across the face. Liza gasped, covering her mouth. Oh my God! I felt nothing. Not shock, not anger, just hollow silence. Liza clicked forward in the footage. That's when it happened. Laurel turned her head and looked directly at the camera. She smiled. Not sheepishly, not like she'd forgotten it was there. No, this was something else entirely. She smiled like she had planned this. Liza looked at me, her face tightening. She knew it was recording. I nodded. She stood slowly, her voice shifting to something firmer. I need to make some phone calls. Stay calm. Don't say anything to her or your husband yet. Then she left me sitting there, with nothing but the image of Laurel's cold grin burned into the screen. It wasn't just a lie anymore. It was a calculated takedown. Jared came home late that night. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my closed laptop, heart still hammering from everything Detective Haynes had confirmed. I didn't even look up when I heard his keys drop into the bowl by the door. He walked in casually, like it was any other night. Laurel called me, he said. She said you're trying to twist everything around, that you edited some video to frame her. I stood up slowly. My voice was flat. You want to see the footage? He hesitated. What footage? I opened the laptop and hit play. He watched in silence. No blinking, no interruptions. Just quiet as the truth unfolded in front of him. When Laurel's hand struck her own son's cheek, I saw his jaw twitch. When she looked into the camera and smiled, he went pale. I paused the video. She hit him. Then she told him to lie. And you believed her. Jared sank into the chair, like someone had knocked the wind out of him. I didn't know. I thought— You thought what? I snapped. That I'd hit a child and then lie about it? That I'd put Maisie at risk like that? His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. You let your sister and your mother treat me like a monster. You let them turn our home into a courtroom. And you didn't even ask me what happened. He stared at the table, and I realized in that moment, he wasn't just weak, he was complicit. But the worst wasn't even over yet. The next day, Detective Haynes called again. Her voice was tense. We reviewed more of the footage. There's something else, a segment you might not have seen. My chest tightened. What is it? There's a moment where your husband walks into frame. He's talking to Laurel. She says, Don't worry, I'll handle it. She'll be gone by tomorrow. I closed my eyes. And Jared responds, Just make sure it looks real. That's when it stopped being betrayal and started becoming conspiracy. After I hung up with Detective Haynes, I sat frozen on the couch, replaying those words over and over. Just make sure it looks real. He said that, Jared, the man I married, the father of my daughter. He didn't just fail to protect me, he helped plan my removal. I wasn't just betrayed, I had been targeted. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Maisie's room, watching her chest rise and fall, thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't remembered the camera. How far would they have taken it? Would I have lost custody, my job, my sanity? By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed a lawyer. Clara Benson came highly recommended. A sharp, no-nonsense family attorney, known for handling high-conflict cases. When I met her at her office the next day, I expected paperwork and process. Instead, I got steel. She listened without interrupting. I showed her the footage, handed over the report from CPS, and gave her every sickening detail I knew. When I finished, she sat back and folded her arms. You're sitting on a landmine, she said. They didn't just lie. They tried to engineer your disappearance. That's legal warfare, and we fight it head-on. Clara moved fast. That same afternoon, she coordinated with Detective Haynes to schedule a second interview with Noah, this time with a child psychologist present. Clara warned me not to get my hopes up too high, but deep down, I had a feeling. Kids are impulsive, sure, but they know when something's wrong, and I was right. Noah cracked under pressure. He admitted that Laurel had hit him, told him to lie, and said, Aunt Corinne will go away for a while, but you'll be okay. He even mentioned Jared. Uncle Jared said Mommy would help make things quiet again. When I got the call from CPS that evening, I felt like the air had been sucked from the room. This wasn't just about family dysfunction. It was a coordinated attack. CPS immediately flagged Laurel's behavior as manipulative and abusive. They began the process of removing her from Noah's custody while the investigation unfolded. She had no idea what was coming. The following day, everything escalated. Jared's coworker, Jake, called me out of nowhere. We barely knew each other, so I knew something had to be wrong. He said, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Jared's been talking about leaving town, said things with you were going to get messy. And he had to be strategic. My heart dropped. He was going to run, maybe even try to take Maisie. I called Clara immediately. He's planning something, I know it. Without missing a beat, she filed for emergency custody and a temporary restraining order. We couldn't risk waiting. The next morning, we beat him to the courthouse. By the time Jared came home, bags packed and Maisie's backpack in his hand, the police were already waiting. Jared stepped through the front door with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and Maisie's tiny pink backpack in the other. He froze when he saw the two officers standing in the hallway. What? What is this? He stammered. I stood behind them, calm but unshakable. You were going to take her. You were going to disappear. He looked genuinely stunned for a second. Then his face twisted into that wounded, performative look I'd come to recognize. You did this to us? He snapped. No, I said coldly. You did this to me. One of the officers stepped forward. Mr. Maddox, you're under investigation in connection with a false report made to CPS and possible conspiracy to commit custodial interference. We'll need you to come with us for questioning. He didn't resist, just stood there, pale and silent, as they led him out. 2 days later, Laurel was arrested. The charges: child endangerment, coercion, and filing a false report with a government agency. That smug smile she always wore didn't make it past the front steps of Gail's house. She looked like someone had finally pulled the curtain back. But Gail wasn't finished. She filed a petition for temporary guardianship of Noah, claiming Laurel was being unfairly targeted and that I was a vindictive manipulator. She stood in court, looking the judge dead in the eyes, and said the footage was doctored, that I had created a fake video to smear her daughter. The judge didn't even blink. "Ma'am," she said, "the footage has already been reviewed and authenticated by CPS and law enforcement. Your statement contradicts the evidence as well as the child's own testimony." Gail's face drained of all color. She left the courtroom in tears. And then came our hearing. It was held in a cold room downtown, with fluorescent lighting, and a judge who didn't waste time on pleasantries. I sat beside Clara. Jared sat alone. Laurel wasn't present, still in custody pending trial. When it was my turn to speak, I told the truth. I told the court how they tried to erase me, how they built a lie so convincing that it nearly destroyed my life. I told them about the fear, the betrayal, and how close I came to losing my daughter over something that never happened. The judge listened silently. Then she turned to Jared. "You knowingly conspired to deceive a government agency. You allowed false claims of child abuse to proceed, knowing they were fabricated. You endangered your child's emotional well-being and violated your partner's basic rights." "I didn't think it would go this far," he muttered. "But you knew it was a lie," she said flatly. "That makes you just as guilty." Her ruling was swift and firm. Jared lost all custody rights. Supervised visitation only. Laurel was denied all contact with Noah, and Gail found unfit. Noah was placed in temporary foster care. Justice didn't just arrive. It thundered through the courtroom like a storm. In the days after the ruling, the house felt hollow. I packed slowly, carefully, every box sealed with finality. I didn't want to take the walls or the memories. Just what mattered. Maisie's drawings, my grandmother's recipe cards, and our peace. With Clara's help, I filed a civil suit against both Laurel and Jared for emotional distress, defamation, and damages. The footage, CPS reports, and Noah's statements were enough to make it airtight. Laurel pleaded guilty in her criminal case. 2 to 3 years in prison, no custody, no contact. Jared tried to settle privately in the civil suit, probably hoping to bury the paperwork. I refused. I wanted it in court. I wanted it on record. When the civil case concluded, the judge awarded a substantial settlement. Enough to move. Enough to rebuild. Enough to give Maisie a new life far away from the lies. I sold the house. We moved north to Flagstaff, Arizona. It's quieter here, cleaner, in a way I didn't know I needed. Maisie started sleeping through the night again. She laughs more, paints again. The circles under her eyes faded within weeks. As for me, I still wake up sometimes with my heart pounding, thinking I hear Laurel's voice, or that someone's at the door with another lie. But then I remember Liza's voice, steady and certain, saying, "You need to see the rest of this clip." That clip saved my life. Jared texted me once since the move. He wrote, "I made a mistake." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. No reply. Because I don't need revenge anymore. I have something better. I have my daughter. I have the truth. And I have peace.
This, my true story. Every morning for 15 years, my wife made me breakfast with a special smoothie she said was healthy for me. She insisted I drink it every single day, and she would watch me finish the entire glass before leaving for work. I thought it was sweet that she cared so much about my health. But last Tuesday morning, something made me suspicious. I switched our smoothie glasses when she left the room for a moment. When she came back and saw what I did, her face went white with panic. What happened next exposed a terrifying truth. Before I tell you, tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. For 15 years of marriage, my wife insisted on making my breakfast every single morning without exception. It became a ritual that she refused to let anyone else do or to skip even once. She would wake up before me and go downstairs to the kitchen. By the time I came down for work, there would be a tray waiting with an elaborate breakfast spread. There was always fresh orange juice and perfectly cooked eggs and toast with butter, and there was always her special health smoothie that she made just for me. She called it her special smoothie because she claimed it was made with ingredients specifically chosen to boost my energy and improve my health. She said it had fruits and vitamins and supplements that would help me at work. She said she made it with love and that drinking it every morning would keep me healthy and strong. I believed everything she told me because she was my wife and I had no reason to doubt her intentions. I thought it was romantic that she cared enough to make me this elaborate breakfast every single day. She would serve the breakfast on a tray and set it in front of me at the kitchen table. She would sit across from me and watch me eat. She always paid special attention to the smoothie. She would watch with intense focus as I picked up the glass and drank. She would not leave the kitchen or start her own breakfast until I had finished the entire smoothie. She would watch me drink every last drop with an expression I thought was love and care. She would smile when I finished and tell me to have a good day at work. I found her attention endearing and romantic. I thought it was sweet that my wife cared so much about my health that she insisted on making this smoothie every day. I thought it showed how much she loved me that she would wake up early and spend time preparing this elaborate breakfast. I never questioned why she was so particular about this daily ritual. I never wondered why she watched me so carefully as I drank. I never asked why she refused to let me skip even one day. I just accepted it as part of our marriage routine. She made the smoothie in a specific glass that was mine. It was a tall glass with a blue rim. She always used the same glass for my smoothie. She would make it in the blender and pour it into that specific glass and bring it to me. She never drank any of it herself. She never made a smoothie for herself. She said the recipe was designed specifically for my nutritional needs and that she did not need the same thing. I never thought that was strange. I just trusted that she knew what she was doing. This routine continued for 15 years without variation. Every single morning she made the breakfast and the smoothie. Every single morning she watched me drink it. Every single morning she would not leave until I finished. It became such a normal part of our lives that I stopped thinking about it. It was just what my wife did. It was her way of showing love and taking care of me. Or at least, that is what I believed for 15 years. I worked long hours at my job in finance. I was an investment manager, and my work was demanding and stressful. I appreciated coming home to a wife who seemed supportive and caring. The morning breakfast ritual made me feel loved and valued. It made me feel like I had a partner who cared about my well-being. I would tell my coworkers about how my wife made me this special healthy smoothie every morning. They would say I was lucky to have someone who cared so much. I agreed with them. I felt fortunate. Looking back now, I realize how carefully she had constructed this ritual. How she had made it seem normal and loving so that I would never question it. How she had turned something sinister into something that appeared romantic. For 15 years, I drank that smoothie every morning, believing my wife was taking care of me. For 15 years, I trusted her completely. I never suspected that the woman who kissed me goodbye each morning was slowly killing me with the breakfast she served with a smile. Over the past 6 months, I had been feeling increasingly ill with symptoms I could not explain. I was exhausted all the time, no matter how much sleep I got. I would wake up tired and go to bed tired. My energy levels were constantly low, even though I was supposedly drinking a health smoothie every morning designed to boost my energy. The fatigue was so severe that I started having trouble concentrating at work. My performance suffered and my colleagues noticed I was not myself. I also developed stomach problems that came out of nowhere. I would have nausea and cramping and digestive issues. Food that I normally enjoyed would make me feel sick. I lost my appetite and started losing weight without trying. My stomach hurt frequently, and I could not identify what was causing it. I tried changing my diet and avoiding certain foods, but nothing helped. The stomach problems persisted no matter what I did. I experienced occasional dizziness that was frightening. I would be sitting at my desk or standing in a meeting, and suddenly the room would spin. I would have to sit down and wait for it to pass. The dizziness was unpredictable and seemed to have no pattern. Sometimes it happened in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. It would come and go without warning. I worried there was something seriously wrong with my brain or my inner ear. I went to multiple doctors trying to figure out what was happening to me. I had blood tests and scans and examinations. I saw specialists who ran every test they could think of. But nobody could diagnose what was wrong. All my test results came back normal or only slightly abnormal in ways that did not explain my symptoms. The doctors were puzzled. They suggested stress or anxiety or possible chronic fatigue syndrome. They prescribed medications that did not help. I was getting sicker and nobody could tell me why. Meanwhile, my wife had been growing distant over the same 6-month period. She was less affectionate and less interested in spending time with me. She seemed preoccupied and distracted. She would zone out during conversations. She stopped asking about my day or showing interest in my work. The emotional connection we used to have was fading. I attributed it to stress or the natural evolution of a long marriage. I did not realize it was because she was planning to kill me. She became secretive with her phone in a way she never had been before. She would take calls in other rooms and speak in hushed voices. She would end conversations abruptly when I entered the room. She started keeping her phone face down on tables and taking it with her everywhere, including the bathroom. When I asked who she was talking to, she would give vague answers about friends or work. She acted defensive when I showed curiosity about her calls. I caught her texting someone late at night multiple times. She would be sitting next to me on the couch with her phone angled away so I could not see the screen. Her fingers would be typing quickly, and she would have a small smile on her face. When I asked who she was texting, she would say it was just a friend or a coworker. She would quickly close the messaging app and change the subject. The secrecy around her phone was obvious, but I did not push because I trusted her. I started noticing charges on our credit card for hotels I had never stayed at. They were local hotels in our city charged during times when I was at work. When I asked my wife about the charges, she said they were mistakes or that she had used the card to book rooms for visiting relatives. Her explanations did not quite make sense, but I accepted them because I wanted to believe her. I did not want to think my wife was lying to me about hotel rooms and what she might be doing in them. All the pieces were there in front of me. My mysterious illness that doctors could not diagnose. My wife's growing distance and secrecy. The phone calls and text messages. The unexplained hotel charges. Everything pointed to something terrible happening in my marriage. But I had been too trusting to assemble the pieces into the truth. I had been too naive to see what my wife was really doing. I ignored the signs because I loved her and could not imagine she would hurt me. Last Tuesday morning started like every other morning for the past 15 years. I woke up and got dressed for work. I came downstairs to the kitchen where my wife had already prepared my breakfast. The tray was sitting on the table with the usual spread of orange juice and eggs and toast. And there in the tall glass with the blue rim was the special health smoothie she made every morning. She was sitting at the table waiting for me with a smile on her face. But something felt different that morning. I cannot fully explain what it was, but there was something in her eyes that unsettled me. She was watching me with the same intense focus she always had when I drank the smoothie. But this time, there was something else in her expression. It looked like anticipation mixed with something darker I could not name. It was the look of someone waiting for something important to happen. The look made me uncomfortable in a way I had never felt before during our morning ritual. I sat down at the table and looked at the breakfast in front of me. Everything appeared normal. The eggs were cooked the way I liked them. The toast was perfectly browned. The orange juice looked fresh. The smoothie was the same color it always was, a dark purple from the berries she said she used. But I felt a growing suspicion that I could not shake. Something about my wife's expression and the way she was watching me triggered an instinct I had been ignoring for months. I picked up my fork and started eating the eggs slowly. My wife continued to watch me, but her eyes kept darting to the smoothie glass. She seemed eager for me to drink it. She seemed impatient in a way that was unusual. Normally, she would make small talk during breakfast or tell me about her plans for the day. But this morning she was mostly silent, just watching and waiting. The silence felt heavy and wrong. And then her phone rang and she had to leave the kitchen to answer it. She looked annoyed by the interruption. She glanced at the smoothie glass and then at me before walking out of the room. She said she would be right back and that I should keep eating. I heard her voice in the next room, speaking quietly to whoever had called. And in that moment, alone in the kitchen, I made a split-second decision born from months of growing suspicion and the strange feeling I had that morning. I stood up quickly and walked to the counter where my wife kept her own glass of water. I picked up her glass and brought it to the table. Then I switched our positions. I moved the smoothie that had been in front of my seat to where she had been sitting. I moved her water glass to my seat. I rearranged the breakfast tray so it would look like she was supposed to drink the smoothie, and I was supposed to drink the water. My heart was pounding as I did this. I was not sure why I was doing it or what I expected to happen. I just knew I needed to see her reaction. I sat back down in my chair in front of the water glass. The smoothie was now sitting where my wife had been sitting moments before. I waited for her to come back with my pulse racing. I felt nervous and foolish. Part of me thought I was being paranoid and that nothing would happen. Part of me thought my wife would laugh at the switched glasses and drink the smoothie without issue. But a deeper part of me, the part that had been noticing all the signs and ignoring them, knew that something was very wrong. My wife came back into the kitchen and sat down. She glanced at the table and froze. Her eyes locked onto the smoothie glass sitting in front of her instead of in front of me. Her face changed instantly. The color drained from her skin and her expression shifted from anticipation to shock to panic. She stared at the glass like it was a bomb. Her hands started trembling. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my instinct had been right. Something was terribly wrong with that smoothie. I looked at my wife and gestured to the smoothie glass now sitting in front of her. I forced a smile and tried to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. I said, "You drink yours first today, honey." I said I want to see if you really made it as healthy as you claim. I wanted to see how she would react to being asked to drink the smoothie she had made. I wanted to test whether my suspicions were justified or if I was just being paranoid after months of illness and noticing her strange behavior. Her face went completely white, like all the blood had drained from her body. Her hands were trembling as she stared at the smoothie glass. She did not reach for it. She did not smile or laugh or act normal. She just stared at the glass with an expression of pure terror. Her reaction confirmed that something was very wrong. If the smoothie was just a healthy drink like she claimed, there would be no reason for her to react this way. But she was clearly panicked by the idea of drinking it herself. She stammered and said, "No, that is yours." Her voice was shaky and uncertain. She said, "I made it specifically for you with the ingredients you need." She was trying to convince me to drink it instead of her. She reached across the table like she was going to switch the glasses back. But I moved the smoothie further away from me and closer to her. I said, "If it is so healthy, then we can share it." I said, "You drink first, then I will drink mine." I wanted to see if she would do it. I wanted to see if she would put the glass to her lips and take even one sip. She refused immediately. She said she did not want any. She said she had already eaten and was not hungry. She said the smoothie was made for me and I should drink it. But her voice was rising and there was panic in it that she could not disguise. She was not acting like someone who was confused about why I wanted her to drink. She was acting like someone who was desperate to avoid drinking something dangerous. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know even before I had proof. I said calmly that if the smoothie was healthy like she claimed, then there should be no problem with her drinking it. I said I just wanted to make sure it tasted good before I drank it. I was testing her. I was pushing to see how far she would go to avoid drinking what she had made. A normal person would have just laughed and taken a sip. A normal person would have drunk the smoothie without hesitation if it was really just fruit and vitamins like she claimed. But my wife was not acting normal. She was acting terrified. She pushed her chair back from the table like she wanted to get away from the smoothie glass. She said she could not drink it. She said it was made specifically for my nutritional needs and would not be right for her. She was making excuses that made no sense. She said, "Please just drink yours like you always do." She was begging me now. Her voice had an edge of desperation. She needed me to drink that smoothie, and she was panicking because I was refusing and asking her to drink it instead. I stood up and said firmly that I was not going to drink anything until she drank first. I said if she refused, I was calling the police right now. I do not know what made me say that. The words just came out, but the threat had an immediate effect on her. I watched the calculation flash across her face. She was trapped between two terrible choices. She could drink the smoothie and expose herself to whatever was in it. Or she could refuse and essentially admit that the smoothie was dangerous. She chose exposure over drinking the poison she had made for me. She pushed the glass away violently, sending it sliding across the table. She screamed, "I cannot." Just those two words. I cannot. And then silence fell heavy in the kitchen. We both stared at each other, understanding what her refusal had revealed. My wife had been putting something in my smoothie, something she could not drink herself, something dangerous enough that she would rather expose herself than consume it. She had just confessed to poisoning me without saying the actual words. I stood there in the kitchen staring at my wife, who was now crying and shaking. She had pushed the smoothie glass away and screamed that she could not drink it. The admission hung in the air between us. I asked her what was in the smoothie. I asked her what she had been giving me every morning for months. She did not answer. She just sat there sobbing with her hands covering her face. I asked again, louder this time. I demanded she tell me what she had put in my morning drink, but she would not speak. She just cried. I picked up my phone and dialed emergency services. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. I told the operator I needed police immediately. I said I believed my wife had been poisoning me. The operator asked if I was in immediate danger, and I said no, but that I had evidence and needed officers to come right away. The operator said police were being dispatched and to stay on the line. I stayed on the phone while my wife sat at the table crying and not looking at me. I did not touch the smoothie glass. I did not pour it out or move it. I left it sitting on the table exactly where it was because I knew it was evidence. I also did not let my wife leave the kitchen. I told her to stay seated and not move. She did not try to leave. She just sat there with her head in her hands, sobbing. I think part of her was relieved that it was finally over. Part of her must have been exhausted from maintaining the lie and the routine for so long. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers came to the door, and I let them in. I brought them to the kitchen where my wife was still sitting at the table. I showed them the smoothie glass and explained what had happened. I told them about the 15-year morning routine. I told them about my mysterious illness that doctors could not diagnose. I told them about switching the glasses and my wife's violent refusal to drink the smoothie. The officers looked at each other, and one of them called for additional units and a forensic team. More officers arrived along with people in forensic gear. They photographed the kitchen and the breakfast table. They carefully collected the smoothie glass and sealed it in an evidence bag. They also collected my wife's water glass for comparison. They took samples of the liquid from both glasses to be tested. They asked me detailed questions about the morning routine and about my health problems. They asked my wife questions, but she barely responded. She just sat there crying. The forensic team said they would test the smoothie at the lab, but that they could also do a preliminary field test right away. They used some kind of chemical testing kit on a small sample of the smoothie. The test changed color within seconds. One of the officers said the smoothie tested positive for ethylene glycol, which is the main ingredient in antifreeze. He said there were also traces of what appeared to be crushed pills. They would need the full lab analysis to identify everything, but the field test confirmed the smoothie contained poison. I felt my legs go weak when they said antifreeze. My wife had been putting antifreeze in my morning smoothie. Antifreeze is toxic and causes organ failure and death if consumed over time. That explained my mysterious illness. That explained the fatigue and the stomach problems and the dizziness. My organs had been slowly failing from antifreeze poisoning. The doctors could not diagnose it because they were not testing for poison. They were looking for natural causes of disease. The officers collected my wife's water glass and tested it too. The water came back clean. Just regular water with nothing added. Her glass was safe while mine contained poison. For months, possibly years, my wife had been methodically poisoning my breakfast while pretending it was an act of love. She had been slowly killing me with antifreeze and crushed medications hidden in a smoothie she served with smiles and kisses. She had been watching me drink poison every morning and then sending me off to work, knowing I was dying. The police arrested my wife right there at our kitchen table while the forensic team continued collecting evidence. They read her rights and placed handcuffs on her wrists. She did not resist. She just cried and said she was sorry, over and over. One of the officers asked if she was confessing to poisoning me, and she nodded but did not elaborate. They led her out of the house and put her in a police car. I watched through the window as they drove away with my wife of 15 years who had been trying to kill me. The forensic team spent hours going through our kitchen. They took samples from the blender where my wife made the smoothies every morning. They photographed everything and bagged items as evidence. They asked me where my wife kept ingredients, and I showed them the cabinets. They went through everything, carefully documenting and collecting. They found bottles of supplements and vitamins that looked normal, but they took everything to be tested in case something had been tampered with. The lead investigator asked me detailed questions about the timeline of my illness. I told him my symptoms had started about 6 months ago. He asked if that coincided with when my wife started making the smoothies, and I thought about it. I realized the special smoothie routine had actually started 15 months ago, not 15 years. For the first 14 years of our marriage, she made regular breakfasts, but no smoothie. The smoothie was a more recent addition to our routine. The timing matched up with when I started feeling sick. The investigator asked for my medical records, and I gave him permission to access everything. He said they would need to see what tests had been run and what my symptoms were over the past months. He said the medical records would help prove that the poisoning was deliberate and ongoing. He said my doctors had unknowingly been documenting the effects of being poisoned without knowing the cause. The records would be critical evidence in the criminal case against my wife. They also seized my wife's phone as evidence. The investigator said they would examine all her messages and calls and internet searches. He said people who plan crimes often leave digital trails of their planning and their motives. He said the phone might contain evidence of why my wife had decided to poison me. I had not even thought about what her motive might be. I had been so focused on the fact that she was poisoning me that I had not asked myself why. The investigator said attempted murder cases usually involved financial gain or clearing the way for another relationship. He asked about our finances and whether I had life insurance. I told him I was wealthy from my career in finance. I had accumulated significant assets and investments over the years. I had a life insurance policy worth several $1,000,000. My wife was the sole beneficiary of everything if I died. The investigator nodded like this was exactly what he expected to find. He asked if I had noticed any changes in my wife's behavior beyond the phone secrecy. I told him about the distance in our relationship and the hotel charges on our credit card. He asked for the credit card statements, and I gave him access to those too. He said the hotel charges suggested she might be having an affair. He said if she was having an affair and wanted to be with someone else, that would explain why she would want me dead instead of divorced. Divorce would mean splitting assets. My death would mean she inherited everything and could be with her lover without financial consequences. The forensic team finished collecting evidence and left. The house felt empty and violated. I sat in the living room trying to process what had happened. My wife had been poisoning me. The woman I loved and trusted had been slowly killing me with antifreeze in my morning smoothie. She had been doing it for months while smiling and pretending to care about my health. She had watched me drink poison every single day and then kissed me goodbye and sent me off to work. The betrayal was so deep and so complete that I could barely comprehend it. The investigator called me 2 days later with information from my wife's phone that explained everything. He said they had gone through all her messages and emails and search history. He said what they found showed clear premeditation and motive for attempting to murder me. He asked if I could come to the police station to review the evidence, and I agreed immediately. I needed to understand why my wife had tried to kill me. I needed to know what had driven her to put poison in my food every morning for months. At the police station, the investigator showed me printed copies of text messages from my wife's phone. The messages were between her and a man named Derek. I did not recognize the name. The investigator said Derek was a co-worker of my wife from her office. The messages went back 18 months, showing a long-term affair that had been going on while my wife was living with me and pretending our marriage was fine. The messages were intimate and sexual and made me sick to read. But the messages were not just about an affair. They were about planning a future together. My wife and Derek had discussed in detail what they would do once I was dead. They talked about selling my house and buying a new one together. They talked about traveling the world with my money. They talked about early retirement and living a life of luxury funded by my estate. They had planned their entire future on my grave. They were counting on me dying so they could be together without having to deal with divorce. The investigator showed me messages where my wife discussed her plan to make my death look natural. She wrote that doctors could not figure out what was wrong with me, and that meant the poison was working. She wrote that once I died, it would look like a medical mystery or natural causes. She wrote that nobody would suspect murder if I just got sicker and sicker until my organs failed. She thought she had created the perfect crime where I would die, and she would inherit everything, and nobody would ever know she killed me. There were messages where Derek celebrated how stupid I was. He wrote that I was an idiot for never suspecting the morning smoothies. He wrote that I deserved what was happening because I was too trusting and naive. My wife agreed and wrote that I was easy to manipulate. She wrote that I believed everything she told me about the smoothie being healthy. She wrote that I drank poison every morning with a smile because I was too dumb to question her. They laughed about how stupid I was while planning to murder me and take my money. The investigator showed me searches on my wife's phone for information about poisons. She had researched antifreeze extensively. She had looked up how much was needed to kill someone. She had looked up symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. She had searched for other substances that could be mixed with antifreeze to make it more effective. She had joined online forums under fake names asking about undetectable poisons. She had spent months researching how to kill me without getting caught. My life insurance policy was worth $25 million. My wife was the sole beneficiary. If I died, she would receive that full amount tax-free. She would also inherit my investment portfolio and my retirement accounts and my share of our house. The total estate she stood to inherit was worth more than $25 million. That was the motive. She wanted my money. She wanted to be with Derek. And she decided murder was the easiest way to get both. The investigator said they had enough evidence to charge my wife with attempted murder and conspiracy. They also had enough to charge Derek as an accomplice since the messages showed he knew about the poisoning and encouraged it. Both of them would be arrested and prosecuted. The investigator said cases with this much evidence usually resulted in long prison sentences. He said my wife and Derek had been stupid to document their entire plan in text messages. He said criminals often thought they were smarter than they were and made mistakes that led to their arrest. I sat in the police station reading messages between my wife and her lover planning my death, planning how to spend my money once I was gone, celebrating how easy it was to poison me. The betrayal was complete and devastating. The woman I loved had not just stopped loving me. She had actively tried to murder me for money so she could run away with another man. The investigation expanded as detectives dug deeper into every aspect of my wife's plan. They subpoenaed my medical records from all the doctors I had seen over the past 15 months. The records showed that my mysterious illness began exactly when my wife started the special smoothie routine. Before that, I had been healthy with no significant medical problems. The timing was not a coincidence. The moment she started poisoning me was the moment my health began to deteriorate rapidly. The medical records documented a clear progression of symptoms consistent with antifreeze poisoning. The doctors had noted my fatigue and stomach problems and dizziness. They had documented weight loss and declining kidney function. They had seen elevated liver enzymes and abnormal blood work. But they had not known what was causing these problems because they were not testing for poison. They had been looking for natural diseases like autoimmune disorders or cancer. They never suspected that my symptoms were the result of deliberate poisoning by my wife. One doctor had even noted in my records that my symptoms were unusual and did not fit any known disease pattern. He had written that it almost seemed like toxic exposure, but could not identify a source. That note was particularly damning evidence. A medical professional had recognized that my symptoms looked like poisoning, but had no reason to suspect my wife was the source of the toxin. If I had died, the doctors would have listed cause of death as organ failure of unknown origin. My wife would have gotten away with murder. The investigator told me that detectives had found evidence of my wife's extensive research into how to commit the perfect murder. They recovered her internet search history going back over a year. She had searched for things like how to poison someone without getting caught and what poisons are undetectable and symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. She had visited websites and forums dedicated to true crime and unsolved murders. She had been studying how other people had committed murder and learning from their mistakes. Detectives found that my wife had joined several online forums under fake usernames. She had posed as someone interested in toxicology and asked detailed questions about various poisons. She had asked what substances were difficult for medical examiners to detect. She had asked how much of certain poisons would be needed to kill someone slowly over time. She had asked whether mixing multiple substances would make detection harder. Other forum members had answered her questions not knowing she was planning an actual murder. The investigation revealed that my wife had purchased antifreeze in small quantities from different stores over several months. Detectives went to hardware stores and auto parts stores in the area with my wife's photo. Multiple store employees remembered selling antifreeze to her. She had never bought large quantities from one place. She had bought small bottles from many different locations so that no single purchase would raise suspicion. She had been careful to avoid creating a pattern that might be traced back to her. Detectives also found crushed prescription pills in our kitchen. They were hidden in the back of a cabinet behind other items. The pills were prescription medications for blood pressure and heart conditions. My wife did not have prescriptions for these medications, which meant she had obtained them illegally or taken them from someone else. When crushed and mixed with antifreeze, these medications would accelerate organ damage and make my death come faster. She had been using multiple poisons to ensure I would die. The forensic analysis of the smoothie I had not drunk that final morning showed exactly what my wife had been giving me. The lab found antifreeze in quantities sufficient to cause serious harm over time. They found crushed medications that affected heart and kidney function. They found other substances that were designed to mask the taste of the poison. Every ingredient in that smoothie except the fruit had been chosen specifically to kill me slowly while tasting normal enough that I would not suspect anything was wrong. Every breakfast I had eaten for 15 months had been attempted murder disguised as wifely devotion. Every time my wife smiled and watched me drink the smoothie, she was watching me consume poison. Every time she kissed me goodbye and sent me off to work, she was hoping that day would be the day my organs finally failed. The evidence showed this was not a crime of passion or a sudden decision. It was calculated, premeditated murder planned over months with careful research and deliberate execution. My wife was arrested at our kitchen table on the morning I switched the smoothie glasses. But Derek was still free, and the police wanted to arrest him too, since the text messages showed he was part of the conspiracy. Detectives went to his apartment with a search warrant 2 days after my wife's arrest. They knocked on his door, and he answered, looking nervous. He had probably heard about my wife's arrest and knew the police would be coming for him eventually. They placed him under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to attempted murder. When detectives searched Derek's apartment, they found even more evidence of the conspiracy. They found a burner phone that Derek had been using to communicate with my wife in addition to their regular phones. The burner phone contained messages that were even more explicit about the murder plan. They discussed specific dosages of poison. They discussed how long it would take for me to die. They discussed what my wife should say to doctors to avoid suspicion. The burner phone proved they knew exactly what they were doing and had tried to hide their communications. Detectives also found bottles of antifreeze in Derek's apartment. He had apparently been helping my wife obtain the poison and store it so that she would not have too much in our house where I might discover it. They found documents showing Derek had been researching my financial information. He had somehow obtained details about my assets and life insurance policy. He knew exactly how much my wife would inherit when I died. The financial motive was clear and documented. They found printed pages showing houses Derek and my wife had been looking at online, luxury homes in expensive neighborhoods far from where we currently lived. They had been planning where they would move after I was dead, and they had my money. They had been shopping for their dream home that would be purchased with my life insurance payout. They had picked out furniture and discussed renovations. They had planned their entire future life together, down to the smallest details. Derek was taken to the police station and interrogated. Initially, he denied everything and said he did not know what the detectives were talking about. But when they showed him the text messages and the evidence from his apartment, he realized lying was pointless. He eventually admitted to the affair, but claimed he did not know my wife was poisoning me. He said she had told him I was sick, but he did not know she was causing the illness. He tried to claim he was innocent and had no part in the attempted murder. But the text messages proved he was lying. The messages showed Derek actively encouraging my wife to continue poisoning me. He had given her advice on how much poison to use. He had told her to be patient and let the poison work slowly. He had celebrated when she reported that my health was getting worse. He had told her she was doing a good job and that I would be dead soon. He was not an innocent bystander. He was an active participant in the plan to murder me. My wife was interrogated separately, and her story was different. Under pressure from detectives and faced with overwhelming evidence, she eventually confessed to everything. She admitted she had fallen out of love with me years ago. She said she stayed in the marriage because she enjoyed the lifestyle my income provided. She said when she met Derek and fell in love with him, she realized she wanted out of the marriage. But she did not want to lose half of everything in a divorce. She wanted all the money for herself and Derek. She admitted that murder seemed easier than divorce when they started planning. She said Derek had suggested that if I died, she would inherit everything, and they could be together without financial loss. She said it seemed like the perfect solution. She said she researched poisons and decided on antifreeze because it was easy to obtain and hard to detect. She said she started adding small amounts to my morning smoothie and gradually increased the dosage as months went by. She said she had expected me to die within a year, but my organs were proving more resilient than she anticipated. She said when I switched the smoothie glasses that final morning, she panicked because she knew she could not drink the poison she had prepared for me. She said her refusal to drink exposed everything, and she knew it was over. She cried during the confession, but the detectives said the tears seemed like self-pity, not genuine remorse. She was sorry she got caught, not sorry for what she had done. My wife was charged with attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Derek was charged as an accomplice and conspiracy to commit murder. Both of them were held without bail because the judge considered them dangerous and a flight risk. The prosecutor said the evidence was overwhelming and he expected to secure long prison sentences for both of them. The case went to trial 8 months after my wife's arrest. I attended every day of the trial and watched as the evidence was presented to the jury. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecutor showed the jury all the text messages between my wife and Derek planning my death. The prosecutor showed the internet search history proving my wife had researched poisons. The prosecutor showed the medical records documenting my declining health. The prosecutor showed the forensic evidence proving the smoothie contained antifreeze. The prosecutor showed receipts for antifreeze purchases from multiple stores. The evidence was devastating and undeniable. My wife and Derek sat at the defense table looking defeated as their plan was exposed in detail. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for both my wife and Derek. My wife showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Derek put his head in his hands and cried. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. At sentencing, the judge said this was one of the most calculated and cruel attempts at murder he had seen in his career. He said my wife had violated the most basic trust between spouses by poisoning me while pretending to care for my health. He said Derek had encouraged and participated in a plan to murder an innocent man for financial gain. My wife was sentenced to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. Derek was sentenced to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole for 10 years. Both sentences were on the high end of what was possible under the law. The judge wanted to send a message that attempted murder, motivated by greed, would be punished harshly. I felt some satisfaction watching them being led away in handcuffs to begin their prison sentences. They had tried to murder me, and now they would spend decades behind bars. With the poison stopped, my health recovered completely within months of my wife's arrest. Every symptom I had experienced disappeared. The fatigue went away and my energy returned. The stomach problems stopped and my appetite came back. The dizziness ended and I felt stable again. My kidney and liver function tests returned to normal. The doctors were amazed by my recovery. They said it proved that all my symptoms had been caused by the poison and not by any underlying disease. They had been treating effects, not causes. Once the source of the toxin was removed, my body healed itself. I divorced my wife from prison. I filed the papers immediately after her conviction. She tried to contest the divorce and claim she deserved part of my assets, but the judge rejected her claims. The judge said someone who attempts to murder their spouse for financial gain has no right to claim any part of that spouse's estate. The divorce was finalized, and my wife got nothing. She would spend 25 years in prison, and when she got out, she would have nothing. No money, no house, no husband, no future with Derek, who would also be in prison for years. I made sure she would never touch a penny of the estate she had tried to murder me for. I changed all my beneficiaries and rewrote my will. I set up a trust that specifically excluded her from any inheritance, even if something happened to me. I wanted to ensure that even if I died, she would never benefit financially from having been married to me. Every morning now, I make my own breakfast. I prepare my own food and drinks. I trust no one to make anything I consume. And every sip of coffee I drink tastes like the second chance I earned by switching 2 smoothie glasses and trusting my instincts over 15 months of lies. I am alive because I switched those glasses. My wife is in prison because she could not drink her own poison.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment in the story has touched your heart, brought you some reflection, some emotion, and hope. Thank you for taking the time to experience it with us, and hope that each next story will always accompany you on your life journey.